Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Will Barclay. Will Barclay represents the 120th Assembly District, an Assembly District that includes the counties of Oswego, Onondaga, and Jefferson. We want to thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us for our program today. Will Barclay, nice to see you.
Mike, good to be here.
We've got lots to get caught up on. We are basically now here in the month of March.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks to go towards the process of negotiating out a state budget, which is due to be in place by the end of March. There have been 4 on-time budgets in a row, but now people are starting to get a little hinky about all the events of this year, the changeover in the Assembly Speaker. The governor seems to be playing some serious hardball in the negotiating tactics that are being called into question by some. You think there's a chance of a 5th on-time budget in a row?
Well, it's going to, first of all, I'm not sure what the word hinky, what was it, hinky you said?
Hinky.
Hinky.
People are feeling hinky
I'm
about
not familiar
it.
with that terminology.
Well, I'm sure the people in Jefferson County are
they know
with me on that.
Okay. No, seriously, I don't know. I think it will be more challenging this year than it has been, because one way how the governor's introduced his budget, he's tied a lot of what he would call reforms. I call it some ideological-based policies that he would like to see passed in the state, which I don't agree with. But he's tied them in his budget proposal, so it makes it very difficult for the legislature to negotiate these proposals out or just reject the proposal straight out. And it's an unfortunate circumstance. So unless we can somehow get those negotiated out with all three, the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor, being able to negotiate those out, I think we're looking at potentially having a late-time budget this year.
Let's talk about some of those issues that have been tied together now as part of the budget negotiations. One that comes to mind is that the governor says, we have these TAP awards, very popular program to provide tuition assistance for residents of the state who want to improve their lot in life and go to college.
Right.
Well, we're going to say this year that if you do not, as a legislature, pass and send to me, the governor, a bill to sign that enacts what's known as the DREAM Act, a bill that has been debated a couple times in recent years.
Yep.
If you don't do that, then we're not going to have the TAP awards anymore.
Yeah.
That's pretty hardball stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what he's essentially saying, I'm going to be out here advocating for people that are not residents of the United States or not illegal immigrants to the United States at the expense of people that really depend on this, the TAP awards, which provides financial assistance for people going to state schools in New York. So I think it's really unfortunate. It's a hardball tactic, and the real problem with it, if I understand it correctly, we can't just go and say, you know what, we're going to accept your proposal on TAP, but we're going to back out the so-called DREAM Act, is what they're calling this thing, where they're giving allowing illegal immigrants essentially to get state aid for higher education. We can't just drop that, cross out of the budget, say we don't accept this, but we're going to pass this part of the budget. It's a little technical.
Right,
what happens is he's tied it. So you're exactly right. He's tied this, what I think an ill thought out proposal, into the TAP award. So if we don't do it, we don't do anything, he's going to get that circumstance. So this is just one of many areas where the governor's really played hardball in the budget. And I think it's really unique, atypical. It's not something we've traditionally done in the past when we're negotiating or get involved in the budget process.
Yeah, it's got something to do with the way he drafted the budget bills this year. He's done it differently from past years. But I mean,
so what he's done, there's two parts of the budget. There's appropriation section where he put in saying, for this program we're going to put $1 million, and there's what they call the Article 7 language. It explains how the program's going to run. Usually that Article 7 language, where you would find some of these proposals like the DREAM Act or not, he's tied it in with the appropriation language. So he says, well, if you don't accept this, we're going to cut out all the money for these programs, so TAP or whatever, it's going to be gone. So the only way we can get the DREAM Act out is by trying to negotiate with the governor and get everybody on agreement, and then write new language or something and pass a new bill at the end of March. So first of all, that's very hard to do anyways. This is the timeline you're looking at, but when you get the contentious ideological issues in there, that makes it even more difficult. So that's why, who knows? We don't know where any of this is going to go. He's drawn some lines in the sand, which again I think is unfortunate. But going forward, let's hope he's willing to maybe negotiate on some of these issues. And frankly, Mike, one thing it was just a dream act, but it's replete with these types of things. He's pushing his ethics proposals. He's done the same thing with ethics. Now everybody says they're for ethics reform, but then when you start looking at some of the details of what he wants public financing of campaigns. I strongly believe that's the wrong direction to go. I don't think that will solve any of the current crises that we've had down here with ethics or corruption, and I think it's just basically welfare for politicians. I'm not sure why taxpayers should be paying for our election expenses. So there's another one that he's tied into his budget proposal. Another one that we've talked about is education. He wants this, again, so-called reform, the way that education runs in New York State. One way he wants to do is tie teacher evaluations to state testing as part of the Common Core. He wants 50% of their evaluations to be based on state testing. That is a hugely controversial policy. He's tied it to education aid. So if we don't pass his proposal, he's proposing, I think, something like $1 billion or more in school aid. But if we don't pass it, he's only going to agree to $300 million more in education aid. And there's some really legitimate reasons to disagree with these policy issues that he's put in.
So all three of those things, the DREAM Act, the ethics reform, the campaign financing, the education reforms that are being talked about here, these are basic civics lessons say the legislature proposes, the executive disposes.
Right.
It sounds like he's trying to circumvent that and just get his way.
Right. He is.
And who needs the legislature? You just do what I'm telling you to do, and we'll be fine.
Right.
That's just not the way it's supposed to work.
And it makes it very hard to have good faith negotiations. I mean, ultimately, you're still going to need the legislature to pass the budget. I mean, we do have that power, but it shouldn't just be his budget, frankly. And that's where the back and forth comes traditionally. So you're absolutely right. I think it's an unfortunate turn of what he's done, and I just think it's going to be. Now, look, I've seen this happen before, and this is maybe part of the negotiations. Maybe we can get the budget done on time, but it just makes it that much more difficult. And already in this state, as we've talked about many times on this show, we already have a political divide in the state. We ultimately have downstate very much versus upstate New York. You already have a difficult budget situation just dealing with that, but putting these contentious issues in the budget really makes it very difficult. And we'll see. We'll see where it goes. It's going to be a challenge.
Let me take you back to talk a bit more about the ethics reforms. This year started off, as I said, with the removal of the Assembly Speaker. Guy had been Speaker for 20-something years, Sheldon Silver. He was charged with corruption charges. He has been indicted on those charges since the last time you were here. And ethics reforms are front and center here. And if you're ever going to do ethics reform, it seems like now would be the time to do them when you got a new speaker in the House and such. But there's still differences of opinion as to how to do it. And what would campaign finance reform do in terms of what Speaker Silver was charged with, which was using his power as Speaker for his own personal gain? Nothing.
Right. It wouldn't do anything. And I'm really disappointed, actually, the direction we've gone since the Speaker stepped down, the former Speaker, Speaker Silver, or Assemblyman Speaker, I guess now, stepped down as Speaker, because there's a lot of factions within our Assembly House saying they want reform. This is the time, and this is the time whoever's going to be the next Speaker, which turns out to be Carl Hastie, we want to make sure that he's going to implement at least some reform in our House. And so far, he became Speaker. The so-called Reform Caucus that was put together by the majority in the Assembly, they've disappeared into the fog, and haven't heard a thing from them. And so as a result, here we do have a new Speaker, but I haven't seen any changes. Now, it's still early yet. Hope springs eternal, but I haven't seen any changes in the way the House runs to make me think we're going to have a better, running House. I'll allow more Democratic, let more rank and file voice be heard out there. So I'm really troubled by that too, Mike. And now you got the budget coming in, so that a lot of stuff just gets washed away while we're trying to get the budget taken care of.
It has been done by this governor in past years. The budgets have been on time the last 4 years, so there is that to be said. But he has tried to put some of the issues that are before the legislature for debate, for discussion, to try to insinuate them into the budget process. And it almost seems like the budget process is complicated enough here. But this almost seems to be an extension of that. He's taking it to the next level.
Yeah. The one other thing I should mention about the school aid and trying to put some of his controversial reforms in, he's pulled back. Every year the governor puts out the school aid runs, and those are based on what he's proposing in his budget. So every school district can look at his proposals and see how much school aid they get. Usually they know that's going to be at the lower amount, and so the legislature very often puts more money in education. So if they use that as their base budgeting numbers, they'll end up getting more and generally be in a better situation. Not always, but that's generally the case. This year he's refusing. It's so complicated. I mean, this illustrates how complicated the school aid formula is in New York, but it's so complicated. He's the only one that can put the runs out that would allow schools with any type of certainty to know what kind of numbers they get. He's not allowing the schools to see what their numbers are. So they're right now completely in the dark about how their budgeting is going to be.
But what they might get in aid from Albany.
Yeah. And, I have school districts that, have 80, 90% state aidable. They get all their aid from Albany. So how are they supposed to budget in the time period that we've given them to make a budget that has to go in front of the voters to decide?
In the month of May.
Right? And he's not even giving them, usually have some guidance because they know where the governor is. But this is another way he's trying to strong arm. I think he's wrongly, but I think what he's trying to do is put the school district thing, they're going to put pressure on us to try to, I guess, agree with what the governor's proposing, but if nothing else, I've seen that backlash against him, and they say, this is ridiculous. We can't be caught up in these political games of what you're trying to do. At the very least, give us a number so we can create our budget around, or at least worst case scenario, create our budget around what those numbers are going to be. So it's very frustrating.
Is part of that discussion have anything to do with the Common Core issue? Because that's so controversial here. It's hard to find legislators who have much nice to say about it. Most people seem to think that it just got rushed into place just much too quickly.
Well, I know it individually because I have two boys. One was in 5th grade last year, and so he was right in the first year of implementation of the Common Core. I know how much teachers and students and parents, frankly, were struggling with it. I don't really mind the learning standards. I think they're might be a good thing, but I've always said, why not start these in kindergarten and work them up through the system? So, of course, we have testing as a result based on that Common Core curriculum. And what the governor is saying, this testing is going to go into the teacher's evaluation. The problem is this system hasn't been in place that long. So, you don't know how the students are going to perform on this testing going forward. And for another reason, do we want to have that kind of testing? Is that a good thing for students? Maybe for a diagnostic perspective, it is good, so you know where the students are, but to try to hold people accountable how students are doing that testing when the program's just been put in place, over 1 or 2 years here, it seems misguided. What we ought to do is roll it in, do the testing, make it have it diagnostic based, so you know how the students are doing, try to get them help if they're not doing well, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years, once the system's been established and kids are working through the new teaching curriculum, and then we can start using that testing as a measure of a evaluation for teachers. But it's way, way too early to do right now.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by this because there are so many bright minds in New York State dealing with educational issues. Are there maybe too many? You got your Board of Regents, you got your education department that's in the executive, you've got the legislature, you've got your local school districts, the teachers' unions, you got the parents of an important lobby.
I'm a very big believer in local control because I think they know the students the best, and they're the ones that have the most skin in the game, frankly. But I think we have the Board of Regents, which basically oversees our education system in New York State, and as we've obviously talked about, but I've argued that we need to reform the way those regents are elected. Currently, it's really controlled by the Speaker of the Assembly. I wouldn't mind seeing gubernatorial control because at least you got someone there that's accountable to all the citizens of New York State rather than just one person who's basically accountable to, was Lower Manhattan, now it's the Bronx. So I think that is problematic. I'd like to see that reformed. So that would go a long ways to have a more democratic process.
So we've got a lot on the plate right now before the legislature, before the governor. We got a budget negotiation process that is well underway, and it's got to be in place by the end of this month. Will Barclay, thanks for joining us today.
You.
Hope to see you folks soon for our next Assembly Calendar.